Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am recording this an hour late than when we are to generally meet. There was some business that the school wanted us to do in relationship to helping you guys get to class, as well as disseminating the need for your computers to get to you. So I apologize. You can see this in an hour. If you have already gone on with your day, that's all good. All right. So we always like to open the class with good morning, good afternoon, but it's not evening yet. So keep your mind open. We're going to begin chapter 4 of the Call of the Wild. We are also going to see a storyboard. I hope it didn't show up last hour. And so what does show up is curious to me. So let's go shopping for what that is. And it is right here. Yeah. This is a historical map. It isn't just that the dogs get hysterical in the stress of trying to get the medicine out to outlying cold areas. And if you see the beige brown land, it should be white, and then it makes sense. What I've been looking for, and if you can find a map that shows where the Yaya beach was, where they landed, I have a feeling it is in Seward that they landed. And they have gone all the way up to Solomon, and they're turning back around. And the Solomon is up at Seward Peninsula. So I guess there's a lot of Sewards out there. Anyway, our story has progressed to a peak, a way to resolve the dilemma of how do you work with people that either aren't working with you or you don't like them. Ooh, yeah. So we're going to switch channels right away. I should have music on, but I think it slows my computer down. And so we're going to just hurry on through and get a summary of what has happened to Buck. Well,
LibriVox recording is in the public domain and is read by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina.
Okay. Chapter 4, you should have gotten in your paper packets. There's one person in here that has not the need to get paper packets, and I'm so proud to say that. You can read along with it as we go. Buck has been undermining the authority of the lead dog named Spitz. He has gotten to a supreme level of executing his dogness, his bodily running, resisting the cold, being able to live without much food because they've been attacked by pack of dogs, and they're the working dogs, and they have two jobs. They take out the medicine, the critical medicine of the pandemic that was occurring 100 years ago. Evidently, about every 100 or 150 years, it seems through history, there's a encroachment upon our humanity in a form of a virus. And so this was diphtheria, and now we're dealing with COVID. So you guys might make the comparison of how things are tough, but there's good. There's still always good in the midst of the not so good. So let's see how Buck now responds to having capitalized on his supreme capacity to be the lead dog because he was out hunting a rabbit and the 60 dogs behind him decided to join in on getting that rabbit, and Spitz went along with him, but Spitz was not to make it back to camp, and this is where we pick it up. And the question I want you to think about is, does Buck become as big a bully and horribly unable to sympathize and be loving to others that he now leads, as was Spitz? So let's see how that shakes out.
The Call of the Wild by Jack London, Chapter 4, Who Has Won to Mastership. Hey, what I say? I speak true when I say that Buck two devils. This was Francois's speech next morning when he discovered Spitz missing and Buck covered with wounds. He drew him to the fire and by its light pointed them out. That Spitz fight like hell, said Gerald as he surveyed the gaping rips and cuts.
I'm an hour late.
And that Buck fight like two hells, was Francois's answer. And now we make good time. No more Spitz, no more trouble, sure.
Yes.
While Gerald packed the camp outfit and loaded the sled, the dog driver proceeded to harness the dogs. Buck trotted up to the place Spitz would have occupied as leader, but Francois, not noticing him, brought Solex to the coveted position. In his judgment, Solex was the best lead dog left. Buck sprang upon Solex in a fury, driving him back and standing in his place. Eh? Eh! Francois cried, slapping his thighs gleefully. Look at that Buck! Him kill that Spitz, him think to take the job. Go away, Chook! He cried, but Buck refused to budge. He took Buck by the scruff of the neck, and though the dog growled threateningly, dragged him to one side and replaced Solex. The old dog did not like it, and showed plainly that he was afraid of Buck. Francois was obdurate, but when he turned his back, Buck again displaced Solex, who was not at all unwilling to go. Francois was angry. Now, by gar, I fix you, he cried, coming back with a heavy club in his hand. Buck remembered the man in the red sweater and retreated slowly, nor did he attempt to charge in when Solex was once more brought forward. But he circled just beyond the range of the club, snarling with bitterness and rage. And while he circled, he watched the club so as to dodge it if thrown by Francois, for he was become wise in the way of clubs. The driver went about his work, and he called to Buck when he was ready to put him in his old place in front of Dave. Buck retreated 2 or 3 steps. Francois followed him up, whereupon he again retreated. After some time of this, Francois threw down the club, thinking that Buck feared a thrashing. But Buck was in open revolt. He wanted not to escape a clubbing, but to have the leadership. It was his by right. He had earned it, and he would not be content with less. Gerald took a hand. Between them, they ran him about for the better part of an hour. They threw clubs at him. He dodged. They cursed him and his fathers and mothers before him, and all his seed to come after him down to the remotest generation, and every hair on his body and drop of blood in his veins. And he answered curse with snarl and kept out of their reach. He did not try to run away, but retreated around and around the camp, advertising plainly that when his desire was met, he would come in and be good. Francois sat down and scratched his head. Gerald looked at his watch and swore. Time was flying, and they should have been on the trail an hour gone. Francois scratched his head again. He shook it and grinned sheepishly at the courier, who shrugged his shoulders in sign that they were beaten. Then Francois went up to where Solex stood and called to Buck. Buck laughed, as dogs laugh, yet kept his distance. Francois unfastened Solex's traces and put him back in his old place. The team stood harnessed to the sled in an unbroken line, ready for the trail. There was no place for Buck save at the front. Once more Francois called, and once more Buck laughed and kept away. Throw down the club, Gerald commanded. Francois complied, whereupon Buck trotted in, laughing triumphantly, and swung around into position at the head of the team. Traces were fastened, the sled broken out, and with both men running, they dashed out onto the river trail. Highly as the dog driver had forevalued Buck with his two devils, he found, while the day was yet young, that he had undervalued. At a bound, Buck took up the duties of leadership, and where judgment was required, and quick thinking and quick acting, he showed himself the superior even of Spitz, of whom Francois had never seen an equal. But it was in giving the law and making his mates live up to it that Buck excelled. Dave and Solex did not mind the change in leadership. It was none of their business. Their business was to toil, and toil mightily in the traces. So long as that were not interfered with, they did not care what happened. Billy, the good-natured, could lead for all they cared, so long as he kept order. The rest of the team, however, had grown unruly during the last days of Spitz, and their surprise was great now that Buck proceeded to lick them into shape. Mike, who pulled at Buck's heels, and who never put an ounce more of his weight against the breastband than he was compelled to do, was swiftly and repeatedly shaken for loafing, and ere the first day was done, he was pulling more than ever before in his life. The first night in camp, Joe, the sour one, was punished roundly, a thing that Spitz had never succeeded in doing. Buck simply smothered him by virtue of superior weight, and cut him up till he ceased snapping and began to whine for mercy. The general tone of the team picked up immediately. It recovered its old-time solidarity, and once more the dogs leaped as one dog in the traces. At the Rink Rapids, 2 native huskies, Teak and Kuna, were added, and the celerity with which Buck broke them in took away Francois's breath. "Never such a dog as that Buck," he cried. "No, never. Him worth $1,000 by gar. Eh? What you say, Perrault?" And Perrault nodded. He was ahead of the record then, and gaining day by day. The trail was in excellent condition, well packed and hard, and there was no new fallen snow with which to contend. It was not too cold. The temperature dropped to 50 below zero and remained there the whole trip. The men rode and ran by turn, and the dogs were kept on the jump with but infrequent stoppages. 30-Mile River was comparatively coated with ice, and they covered in one day going out what had taken them 10 days coming in. In one run, they made a 60-mile dash from the foot of Lake Labarge to the White Horse Rapids. Across Marsh, Tagish, and Bennett, 70 miles of lakes, they flew so fast that the man whose turn it was to run towed behind the sled at the end of a rope. And on the last night of the second week, they topped White Pass and dropped down the sea slope with the lights of Skagway and the shipping at their feet. It was a record run. Each day for 14 days they had averaged 40 miles. For 3 days, Perrault and Francois threw chests up and down the main street of Skagway and were deluged with invitations to drink, while the team was the constant center of a worshipful crowd of dogbusters and mushers. Then 3 or 4 Western bad men aspired to clean out the town, were riddled like pepper boxes for their pains, and public interest turned to other idols. Next came official orders. Francois called Buck to him, threw his arms around him, wept over him. And that was the last of Francois and Perrault. Like other men, they passed out of Buck's life for good. A Scotch half-breed took charge of him and his mates, and in company with a dozen other dog teams, he started back over the weary trail to Dawson. There was no light running now, nor record time, but heavy toil each day, with a heavy load behind, for this was the mail train, carrying word from the world to the men who sought gold under the shadow of the pole. Buck did not like it, but he bore up well to the work, taking pride in it after the manner of Dave and Solex, and seeing that his mates, whether they prided in it or not, did their fair share. It was a monotonous life, operating with machine-like regularity. One day was very like another. At a certain time each morning, the cooks turned out, fires were built, and breakfast was eaten. Then, while some broke camp, others harnessed the dogs, and they were underway an hour or so before the darkness fell, which gave warning of dawn. At night, camp was made. Some pitched the flies, others cut firewood and pine boughs for the beds, and still others carried water or ice for the cooks. Also, the dogs were fed. To them, this was the one feature of the day, though it was good to loaf around, after the fish was eaten, for an hour or so with the other dogs, of which there were 50 and odd. There were fierce fighters among them, but 3 battles with the fiercest brought Buck to mastery, so that when he bristled and showed his teeth, they got out of his way. Best of all, perhaps, he loved to lie near the fire, hind legs crouched under him, forelegs stretched out in front, head raised, and eyes blinking dreamily at the flames.
Okay, so here we have a conclusion to how now Buck is the leader of the pack. And you see how light the load was when he first assumes his responsibility, because he insists that the other dogs that are in the leashes with him will pull their weight equally. And when all do, they fly. And Perrault and Francois are amazed at his excellence, their excellence in a solid force going forth. But they're carrying just the serum for the diphtheria that's happening. When they get to drop that off, then they become a different kind of mush dog, where they are to take the male, which is heavier and not as exciting to do, but Buck does a good job, whether he likes it as much or less than the other job. And that sort of tells us that sometimes we have to do a good job when it's not easy to do, because we know how. And so this is a good place to stop today and go back to where we are going to share the slides that are expected of you to have completed, and that they are for you to examine the writing of the plot development. You know to do the final slide every week. It changes. Every day you are expected to read 20 to 25, 30 minutes a day. This is a reading class. On Monday, we did the plot development level 1 perfect sentence, where Buck and Spitz are vying for the leadership, and then we read afterwards about how today Buck is the leader. Now this is the grammatical repartee you need. All of the blue words are nouns. All of the red words are verbs, and all of the purple words are adjectives. And so on the first line, you will see the phrase, in an outlying trail, Buck sees Anne. Okay, so how you know you have a noun is, can you capitalize it? Can you touch it? Can you put a the in front of it? And a the tells you a noun is coming, a noun is coming, but it can also be a an, it can be a this word, and it just tells you in about 2 or 3 words, you're going to have a noun. And every time I say noun, I raise my voice so that you can see it demarked differently. In blue, I'm so blue. How about you? Okay, so Buck is a capital lettered dog, bird, word. If you hit the trail, right, you can test it as a verb by putting a the in front of it. The trail Buck was on. was an opportunity. To what? Okay, so on the second line, we have opportunity. All right. And how do you know? Because you have an "and" on the first line that could drop down, but we're just going line by line and we had to divide it up, and that's all good. So we got the opportunity, an opportunity, this opportunity. You see how it is, you know? Okay, we have a capital letter right here to tell us it's a proper noun. Spitz is a proper noun. Seeking treacherous reconciliation by tripping him. Okay, so we can see how to test your nouns. If you have a noun with a T-I-O-N on it, T-I-O-N on it, T-I-O-N on it, did I say it enough? That has been a verb turned to a noun. If I reconcile myself to you, we balance the books. But the reconciliation we seek, it just went and it changed into a noun. And when I go, that means it was something else before it became what it is in that sentence because of what is it next to. And we have a substitution for a noun. If we say him, tripping him, it is referring to either Buck or Spitz. And since you heard and read the story at the end of chapter 3, we know who the him is. Him is Spitz. Buck trips Spitz, and Spitz goes down, and the other 60 dogs dogpile him. It's not a football that they're looking for. They're looking to get rid of their leader. Treacherous. Huh? Okay. So now we're going to see what kind of words are giving us some clarification to our nouns. Okay. If I say it is an outlying area, okay, it could be kind of misleading because usually we have the ing to be how we know we've got a verb. If you can bang it, take a rope and hang it, it's a verb. But if you put it in front of a noun, it changes and it becomes that magic adjective in front of a noun. Wow, is that exciting or what? We could say the high trail to Nebraska. We could have said the dirty trail to Oklahoma. Okay, so if you can put it in front and give more information to what kind of a trail, what kind of descriptors are going to give you information about your noun, that qualifies as an adjective. Okay, so an opportunity, we could have put an only opportunity, and only would become a adjective describing opportunity, but it's not there. So I'm just trying to show you how magical adjectives are to give information, and they can change. And you're going to see how to also know that when you have certain words that have an ending of O-U-S, L-Y, F-U-L, they are going to be adjectives. Okay. So treachery, if I put a Y on it, could be a noun. But treacherous is an adjective telling what kind of reconciliation. Treacherous reconciliation. Yeah. Spitz dies in this balance of power. Yeah, by tripping him. Okay, now you might think that tripping him is a adjective describing him, but he doesn't trip out. It's an action verb. And you can test your verbs now. See Oh yeah, line 1. Do we have any verbs? Yes. See. And we make all of our verbs red. Red rover, send a verb over. Can we put a ing on sabotage? Please say yes. Sabotaging. He was continually sabotaging Spitz. He was a bad guy for doing that because that was insubordinate. That was undermining the authority of his Spitz's leadership. But the other dogs let him. They didn't turn to Buck and say, quit it, cut it out. Okay, so sometimes you have to take responsibility for allowing circumstances to happen. And if you don't agree, then you need to speak up. Okay, so Buck was the only one standing and nobody said, quit that. So he forged ahead with the treacherous reconciliation by tripping him, being Spitz. And that's a verb. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nouns and 3 verbs with 2 possible adjectives describing the kinds of nouns. So that's all we're going to do today. If you're wondering, what are these other words that we haven't highlighted? Oh, seeking, bad teacher, bad teacher. I'm seeking you to help me to know how to make it right. Okay, so we have 4 verbs, 2, 4, 6 nouns, and 2 adjectives. The other words are prepositions or articles, where you say, now it's going to be awesome. Okay. Alrighty, that's the end of that. And our close for the day is to always exit on a silly ha-ha note. And the silly ha-ha note you are to put into this to show that you did come to class. You did see to the end the video on Wallace and Ladmo. And there are 3 questions. This is in your send away attachments that are always sent to you in the folder in the class section you're from. Are also sent to you when I send you a wonderful invitation. It doesn't look like it's sharing. Come on, come on. Why is it doing this? It's just not wanting to do it. It's just being a bad one. We want to see the extra credit slide for Wallace and Ladmo. Come on, come on. Give me a purple one. There it is. Okay, it was taking a minute. You got 3 questions. I'm looking for 3 complete sentences. So in the first one, what you're going to see, you're going to meet Gerald. Gerald is kind of a pill. And you're going to decide whether you like Wallace and Ladmo more than you like Gerald, or you like Gerald better than you like Wallace and Ladmo. It's for you to decide. In sentence 2, you're going to write one thing that's so stupid that either Gerald does, Wallace does, or Ladmo does, who are in this scene, that makes it funny. The last question in a complete sentence is to define what was so stupid it was not funny and it will never be funny. If you found anything like that, you can put that down there. All right, so here is your video sharing of those silly guys, Wallace and Ladmo. You ready, Eddies? Okay, we're going to go yo to the boink, 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 and we're going to say bye, and off we go. Maybe. Come on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was just doing it. It was a lot of fun. Who that could be? Somebody's here. Oh, hi, Gerald. It's Gerald.
Who needs you? Besides that, I'm ready to raise your cultural levels and plateaus, because for the next 35 minutes, I am going to present the first viola Solo, every performer of the Wallace and Ladmo show. Is that exciting?
I don't have time for your big fiddle. We don't have time for this.
Hey, it's a viola. It's not a big fiddle. And besides that, if you stop wasting your time with those dumb cartoons, you're going to have something that I can do.
I've got to tell you about this letter.
Oh, yeah. Tell them about the letter that came in.
What do I care about that?
Dear Wallace, there's something you should know. I tried to ask Gerald for his autograph and he kicked me.
I did not.
He will try to deny this, but it's true.
I don't know anything about it. Besides, he started it.
He will probably try to tell you that I started it, but I didn't. I am just a little tiny girl, and my mother told me always to play nice and never fight with other little girls.
I'm a boy. I don't want to hear any of that nonsense. And besides that, she was going to hit me with a baseball bat.
Don't let him pull that bit about the baseball bat. He always says that in self-defense, but he is the one who does all the bad stuff.
Ladmo causes all the trouble.
Let's see, it is not Ladmo, it is Gerald. He is a troublemaker. I must tell you that.
I'll get that kid. It's the last thing I do.
Even if he threatens me. Your friend Kathy Higgins, age 6.
Age 6 is at least 7 and big. I'm telling you, the tallest 7-year-old I've ever seen in my life.
P.S. I am only 6 and weigh 58 pounds. Gerald the go jump.
You see, that's the kind of hostile letters that you are encouraging by having these little twerps right in here, come down here and visit the studio audience when all you need is me. I'm telling you right now, if you were...
It's time for the poetry contest.
Booty?
Yes! This trophy will be given to the winner of the poetry contest. And now here's contestant number 1, Gerald.
I came prepared with my official Gerald.
Bye. Keep an open mind. Don't let people bully you and tell things that aren't true. See you
I
on
wandered lonely as a cloud.
Monday.
Floats on high over vales and hills. But all at once I saw a crowd.